Well, it's time to finish a very busy week here at the Honest Football Podcast because after our League One playoff semi-final preview, the National League final playoff preview, the final day of the Championship season and a big weekend in the Premier League, it is time, last but certainly not least, to look ahead to the EFL League Two playoff semi-finals. The 23-24 season, tight and tense as always, two sides missing out on the playoffs by a point, one side making a late run from a relegation battle all the way up to 5th, and one side that were the outright favourites for relegation at the start of the season making it into the top 7. Yes, the playoffs are always unpredictable, but particularly in this league, where you never know what you're going to get between four evenly matched teams. The League 2 playoff semi-finals both take place starting on Monday the 6th of May, the bank holiday in the UK. Crawley Town versus Milton Keynes Dons at 3 o'clock. Crewe Alexandra versus Doncaster Rovers at 5:30, and then the reverse fixtures in the same order take place on Thursday and Friday night. So we're looking forward to these, and we're going to discuss, preview and predict what's going to happen in both legs of both ties. We're then going to decide which two sides will make it to Wembley on Sunday the 19th of May. As always, I'll encourage you to get involved in the comments. Give us your predictions for both ties and both legs of them. Let us know who you think's getting to Wembley. If you beat or match my overall prediction score, you will get a shout out in the next recap when we look ahead to the final in a couple of weeks' time. For now, though, I've got the impossible job because we're going to look ahead to these two playoff semi-finals, and three of the teams are separated by 1 point. Two of them separated by goal difference over a season, and we've got to work out who's going to win. And when you look at all of the stats, I normally go into this looking for clues, and there are not many. In both ties, we've got two teams that have won one game each against each other this year. Their top goal scorers for each club separated by 4 goals. The defensive records over the season, over 46 games for the four sides, separated by 3 goals. And only one that has scored more than the rest. Even the home and away records between a couple of them, very hard to call. So this is going to be a very difficult job, and like our pre-season predictions for League 2, will probably make us look very silly. Who's going to join Stockport County, Wrexham and Mansfield Town in League 1? Well, let's start discussing it. We'll start in chronological order with the first tie to take place, which is Crawley Town of 7th place versus MK Dons in 4th. Now, MK Dons, it has to be said, of the clubs that were relegated last year, it certainly looked the strongest outfit. They managed to get to 78 points and were in that battle for 3rd, well, until they played Mansfield a couple of weeks from the end of the season. They've got goals in the team. They are by far the highest scorers in the playoffs, 10 goals clear of anyone else, and only behind the top 3 in Notts County for the whole season across the division. However, defensively, they're just as susceptible as any. And if nothing proved that, it was the last day of the season where, yes, a little bit of rotation and maybe an eye on the playoffs, but a 4-4 draw at home to Sutton, who were fighting for survival. The game before that, a 5-3 at Harrogate, and then the 4-1 defeat at home to Mansfield. A couple of weeks before that, a 3-3 in Notts County. MK Dons games normally mean goals, but to be fair, considering their final day relegation last year and the fact that at that point they were struggling to put the ball in the net, they've really responded well this season, look a far better team, and do look in a good place going into this playoffs. You've also got Max Dean, who has come back and hit the ground running after injury, and Alex Gilby, who I saw at Stevenage last year, who's been a brilliant player at League 2 level on several occasions in the past. All of them in double figures for the season overall, and all of them lead into a very potent attack when it comes to MK Dons. However, their away record isn't the best. They've lost 10 games on the road this season and conceded 41 goals while doing so. And actually, of the 4 teams in the playoffs, they've conceded the most goals on the road. So is the first leg perhaps a danger for them against a Crawley side who have been, well, weaker at home than MK Dons for sure, but still won 11 of their matches and been a little bit tighter defensively. Crawley, let's move on to them. They've had a fabulous season. They were the pre-season favourites for relegation. I think me and Craig both expected them to be right in it. They finished 22nd last season and survived pretty fortuitously. In the end, they've responded and they have shocked everyone. They've solved a lot of those problems off the pitch, obviously had a controversial manager before, and a lot of the talk wasn't actually about the football. Whereas this season, they've just built a side that is really effective. Danilo Orsi with 19 goals has been an absolute starlet for them. They finished the season with 3 games unbeaten, winning the last one at home to Grimsby. But again, if you take away that clean sheet on the final day, I've got to mention Lolos as well, who's popped up with a fair few goals, 13 I think in the league. But they do concede. If you go back to the 5 games prior to that, 4 against Wrexham, 3 at home to Colchester, 2 away at Sutton, sides down there they're letting in goals against. But at home, as I've said before, they've let in 30 goals this year, which is a far better record than MK Dons on the road, letting in 41. So if Crawley are going to win this tie, you feel the first leg has to be the one. I know away from home they've got a good record in terms of points, but MK Dons score goals for fun at home. They've got a brilliant home record, which is ironic considering the atmosphere in the stadium a lot of the time. And you look at the other side of that and think, well, Crawley are a little susceptible defensively. Don't often draw on the road. They either win or they lose most of the time. And that makes it incredibly problematic if they haven't got a lead going into the second leg. I'm going to stick my neck on the line and say, I think MK Dons win the second leg, no matter what the position of the tie. It's whether Crawley can do enough to stop them before. Of course, MK Dons have got recent playoff experience. Not in this league, ironically. They were beaten by Wickham a couple of years ago, weren't they, in the League One playoffs? It's all gone a little bit wrong for them since then. And while I know a lot's talked about with the stadium and all of that, I'm not going to get involved with Pete Winkleman's decision on gimmicks with ticketing, where to put fans and what he's done with away fans before. For me, it's going to be a focus on the football. Crawley Town have to win the home leg. I think that's a given. MK Dons don't draw many on the road and they do let in a fair few goals. So do I go for the thriller or do we predict it being a bit more cagey? It's not like the League One and the Championship playoffs normally, where you've got teams in 3rd and 4th that are going to look stronger over the season and you're looking for a shock. The League 2 playoffs always evenly matched. Of course, in League 1, we've basically got 3 of the 4 same teams as last year. Here we've got 4 completely new contenders, a side that were in League 1 last year versus a side that nearly fell out of the Football League. I'm going for a thriller in the first leg. I think MK Dons will come out to attack. Crawley at home will know they've got to win if they've got any chance, but they've not got the best home record. I am going to go for them to nick it in the home one. As much as I'm really tempted by a draw, neither of them really draw that many games, do they? Only 9 and 7 respectively. In fact, Crawley, bar Tranmere, have drawn the least games in the league this year. So I'm going to go for Crawley to nick the home leg, and I'm going to go for a thriller by 3 goals to 2. I think from what we've seen so far with the League 1 and League 2 playoff lineup, this on paper looks potentially the most entertaining tie. But in the home leg, the reverse fixture for MK Dons, I just see them being too strong. They've got goals everywhere, and it's about whether they can keep them out of the back. But at home, they have been a bit better at that. They've only let in 27 at home. It's on the road they've had problems. So if they avoid defeat in the away leg, they're definitely through. Even losing 3-2 as I've predicted, I think they come back in style. I'm going to go for a really big home win, and I think MK Dons will win the reverse fixture by 4 goals to 1. So doing my maths very quickly there, that puts MK Dons through in my book by 6 goals to 4 on aggregate. So I am going with the league table and the form book and going for 4th place MK Dons to make the final, which, to be fair, for Crawley, is not the worst outcome in the world. To be 7th after where they were last season is an incredible effort. And just to be back focusing on football and playing well, I think it's going to make a massive impact for them, and hopefully they can move forward. They did lose 18 games in a league season though, the joint most of anyone in the top half of the division. And I just think when they get to the second leg at Stadium MK, based on MK Don's home record, and although their away record's good, based on the number they've conceded on the road, I just think it's going to be too much. So I'm going MK Dons by 6 goals to 4 on aggregate. Let's move on to the second tie, where I can make myself look even more stupid. It is 5:30 on Monday, followed by a Friday night football, and it is Crewe Alexandra versus Doncaster Rovers. 6th v 5th, 2 sides that finished the season very differently, and 2 sides that ended up being separated by 1 goal on goal difference. How on earth do you call this one? 71 points apiece. The only difference is Crewe were draw specialists, 14 draws, just 13 defeats. Doncaster won over 20 games, but only drew 8 with 17 defeats over the course of the year. But Doncaster did come into this with 5 wins in a row before the final day of the season. That pretty much wrapped up their playoff place after a 2-2 draw at Gillingham made sure of it. That took them ahead of the likes of Barrow, who finished the season atrociously, having been in that top 7 for virtually all of it, and Bradford, who also finished in style after a poor start. So you look at Doncaster, who were, I think, 22nd as recently as the start of February, and now they're up in 5th place in those playoff places, which I did predict pre-season. And it's the value of sticking with a manager. I want to compare it to Gillingham, who they played on the final day. I mentioned it back in the Championship final day predictions. They sacked Neil Harris early in the season when they were in and around the mix and keeping things tight, trying to develop a style. And he's now gone and saved a Championship club. And Doncaster have stuck with a manager who was struggling at the start, and they're reaping their rewards. So I want to say fair play on that front, because manager stability generally does reap rewards. We've seen it with Mansfield this season and Nigel Clough up in third, and Dave Challinor at the top as well after losing the playoff final. So Doncaster deserve credit. And you always wonder about these sides, don't you? The teams that come into it in flying form after a slow start, have they hit form at the right time? You look at their last 6 games, they've scored 2 in 2 of them, 4 in 3 of them, and 3 in 1 of them. And that includes wins against teams such as Gillingham and Barrow, who were fighting for the playoffs with them, and Walsall a few weeks ago. So they beat all those teams in and around them to leapfrog them. They got their rewards for it. Joe Ironside, of course, is the star man up front. 20 goals for him this season. The top scoring player from any of the 4 sides in the playoffs. But he did pick up that red card on the final day. Not ideal preparation going into the playoffs, but given their recent form, I don't think they'll be too upset. Because while Joe Ironside is certainly the main goal threat, they have got goals from everywhere in recent weeks. And they've just found a way to win games regardless. Now, I'm looking at the rest of the form book, and defensively, they had tightened up for a little while, but 2 of the last 3, they've let in a couple of goals. Is that something we've got to be concerned about? And the other thing I've got to worry about is their away record. 10 defeats on the road and just 27 points from their 23 games. The worst away record of any of the 4 sides in the playoffs. MK Dons the next worst, 4 points clear of that. At home, though, they have been incredibly strong. 14 wins, just 2 draws, and plenty of convincing wins towards the end of the season as well. It looks like a hard game to call on paper, and it potentially is. If we look at their opponents, Crewe, Alexandra, who again, a very good season, much improved on last year, where in fact 5th, 6th and 7th were all in the bottom half last season. But he didn't finish the season well. 3-0 defeats against Wrexham, against Grimsby, and against Forest Green at home, who finished bottom, is not the way to come into it. Do you want to go into the playoffs having fallen away a little as the lowest scorers in the top 7, and with 2 goals scored in your last 6 and 3 successive 3-0 home defeats? It is not ideal preparation. And I look at this tie where 2 teams over a season have been so evenly matched and think, do you have to go with momentum, or does it go out of the window? Because Crewe Alexandra, of course, have got some star players this year. Elliot Nevitt, 16 goals for him overall. Crucially got one right at the end on the final day to help them avoid defeat, boost his goal record, and get them in with a little bit of momentum. But you've got to say it's been a great season in spite of that. Defensively, they're just about the best of the 4 teams in the playoffs, but they are considerably weaker in attack, which is a bit of a concern too. Unlike Doncaster, and maybe this balances it out, they've got a very poor home record in comparison. Slightly better than Crawley's, but 11 wins and 38 points. And not a positive goal difference overall. 35 for and against, albeit the last 3 home games contributed to that significantly. Where on the flip side, you look at Doncaster, their home form would put them in the top 5. But Crewe on the road aren't bad. They've drawn 9 of their away games this season. They stay in games. And I think that's the thing I'm looking at. Crewe away from home, tight games, like to stay in them and try not to get beat. Doncaster at home very rarely draw. It's win or bust for the most part. And in recent months, it's generally been win. And then in a reverse fixture, you've got a Crewe side that are pretty poor at home and a Doncaster side that have been pretty poor away from home. How on earth do you go for this? I have to go based on the form book. Just the way that Doncaster have finished the season and snuck in, these are the sorts of teams that normally get promoted. It's the way that it so often works. A side that comes from miles away, sneaks in on the final day or 2, and then just flies their way through the playoff with momentum. It's the only thing I can use to separate the 2 teams, so I'm going to have to do so. In the first leg where Doncaster visit Crewe, I am going to go for a Doncaster win. I'm only going to go for a narrow one, not another 3-0 defeat for Crewe. But I think I'm going to go for Doncaster to keep up their scoring form and nick it by 2-1 away from home. Then in a reverse fixture with that advantage and with their better home record this year, I'm going to go for them to win yet again and restrict a Crewe side that don't score many goals and win by 2-0. So based on that, I've got Doncaster going through. It looks fairly comfortably on aggregate by 4-1. But I do think both of these games will be tight. I just ultimately think momentum will decide it. Doncaster are flowing, they're scoring goals for fun, and Crewe have sort of stumbled over the line after a really strong first half of the year. They've been playing midway through the season. You'd have been going for a Crewe win every day, wouldn't you? So two pretty impossible games to call, a very difficult job. I think we're all going to be having a little guess and pulling names out of a hat when it comes to these predictions. But this is what I've gone for the two EFL League 2 playoff semi-finals in this 23-24 season. I've gone for MK Dons to get past Crawley Town 6-4 on aggregate with a 3-2 away defeat, followed by a 4-1 home victory. And then in the second tie between Crewe, Alexandra and Doncaster, I'm going for the recent form to prevail. Doncaster to continue their unbeaten run with a 2-1 away win at Crewe in the first leg before winning the reverse fixture at their home ground by 2-0 on Friday. So based on that, I've got MK Dons and Doncaster at the top two at Wembley again. God, I've done it 2 leagues in a row. Am I going to live to regret that? We'll find out that answer over the next week or so. Get your predictions down in the comments. Let me know if you agree or disagree. I'm a complete neutral for this, so good luck to all 4 teams. I hope you go well. I hope they're great games to watch as a neutral. It's going to be a fun bank holiday Monday for me. If you enjoyed this little preview, please do chuck a thumbs up on it. Subscribe to stay up to date with everything across the podcast. We've got the Championship playoffs starting next week, 2 more match days in the Premier League, and of course the promotion finals for League 2 and League 1 to follow as well. You can find all the other prediction shows you've missed this week up in the eye above. Check them out for the Championship, League 1, National League, the playoff final tomorrow of course, and the Premier League weekend as well. And I'll see you back here again next midweek as we look ahead to the Championship playoff semi-finals and the penultimate weekend in the Premier League. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.